Hi, you are watching SightsIn Plus, and this is Romesh Shivasto. Please do subscribe the channel for the HR news, for HR updates, and conversation with the top now CHROs, thought leaders, and business heads. As we are looking ahead to 2025, so I think it's the right time to explore the trend for coming year. Today, we are going to dive deep the employment trend for 2025. And joining us, Mr. Sumit Kumar. He is the Chief Strategy Officer at TeamLease Degree Apprentice. Welcome, Sumit. It's a pleasure connecting with you again.
It's always a pleasure speaking to you, Ramesh. And thank you so much for having me again.
Sumit, how do you anticipate the employment trend for coming year, 2025?
Great. I think what we've seen, the kind of the way the macroeconomics is panning out, and I think that's going to have a direct influence even on the employment as well. Also, we would see the implementation of employment-linked incentives, which were announced earlier in the budget. So that's also expected to kind of have an impact in the employment numbers as well. But what will be heartening to see would be the numbers going up in the manufacturing side of it, because that's what the larger agenda that the country is focusing on to establish itself as a, as a manufacturing hub, a global manufacturing hub. So I think we would see a trend where there would be more and more jobs being created in the manufacturing sector. We would also see that the way GCCs are coming to India, the way it's getting, the way the policies are being framed, which is more favorable to look at, and also that the tier two cities are now being considered for the establishing of these GCCs. So we would also see the employment generation going beyond the metros. Uh, that's another trend to look at. And again, coming back to the GCC side of it, we will see that largely this segment was dominated by the IT and the BFSI. But we've also seen now that the manufacturing GCC is also setting up operations in India. So I think that's where you could see that the employment getting generated. BFSI is another segment to look for where there would be influx in the employment. That was from the sectoral point of view. The agenda has always been to see that how India could improve the women participation in the labor market. So that's one area also that we are going to witness, that currently we are at 37%. We would possibly and should cross about 40% by the end of next financial year that we're getting into, because today we've seen a lot of traction which is being built up even for the women employment, not just in the core services, which historically has been, but even in the manufacturing sector for the core, manufacturing assembly lines, where there's now the demand for the female employees has kind of gone up. That's another part. We would definitely see the influence of technology. That's where you would see a lot of jobs getting influenced by the AI, and I don't think so. There's a need to worry about AI taking away the jobs. I think the idea that how these jobs are going to get transitioned. Yes, the workforce will have to go through a reskilling process, because you realize typically the basic level skill sets where the AI is really going to have an influence. So I think there's a lot of reskilling stuff of the existing workforce that would be taken up by the employers. That's another area to look at, for the workforce development. I think these are some of the trends to look for in the coming years.
Very nicely put, I would say. And if you look at the industry right now, so there are a lot of industry where we see the skills gap. And that may be the manufacturing, that may be IT, that may be electronic industry. Everywhere we see the skills gap. Recently, the government has also introduced PM internship scheme, and the target is to provide the internship to 5 crore youth in 5 years. So maybe if you look at the slot, as they started also the pilot project with the 1.2 lakh internship. So maybe next year, can we see around 1 crore internship to the youth as well?
See, internship is a need of the hour. Whether I would say internship or apprenticeship, they are very interchangeable, terms, but have or meet the same objective, which is how do you make people more employable, and the process is also same, which is on-the-job learning. Because the idea is that a person should not just acquire technical and functional skills, but also develop cognitive skills, which are very essential for a workplace productivity. So definitely, if you were to look at the team internship scheme, is a very welcome move, considering what was, came out in the economic survey that 50% of our graduates are unemployable. Another alarming state is that it's not just the graduates, but even if I were to look at an ITI, which is supposed to go through the best technical skills, even their employability rate is about 40%. Now, why these people think, in spite of being qualified and knowledgeable and skilled, why they still become an unemployable is because they lack the soft skills. So definitely a scheme like a PM internship scheme, or let's say an apprenticeship system, or which is there in the country, will definitely help the youth to be more job ready. And here we're talking about a section which is entering into the labor market, right? So I think that's something which we would definitely tend to see, that schemes like this will help to for the employers, that how they can reduce their not reduce, but I think overcome the challenge of the skill deficit that is there, right? Definitely, there has to be a lot of industry and academia collaboration as well, because that would be required to develop uh, the curriculums which are more, job readiness, or which are more industry inclined. And specifically, we have seen that happening already in the IT space. We've seen that happening even in the semiconductor and a lot of other domains where there has been an active academia and industry collaboration, where the industry is taking keen interest in creating a manpower which is not just qualified but also job ready. And it's a blend, going to be both of theory as well as the your practical, with a more emphasis on the practical. If you say that whether we will be able to achieve 1 crore, I definitely expect the kind of overwhelming response that the scheme has got in the initial phase, and we're going to see the launch happening in the first week of December. Uh, I don't see that as a challenge, because the kind of the organization that have come forward in exploring the scheme, and at the same time, way it's getting promoted to the general public, that there's a enough awareness about not just about the scheme, but also how to make use of the scheme and the accessibility factor. I think definitely the scheme is going to be a super success, and that's going to be just the phase one. When we talk about the phase two, I think we also need to look at a larger ambit, of how do we widen the scope? Because here right now we're only talking about the graduates, but there's a whole lot of section which is 10th class or 12th class who tend to get into informal employment because of lack of exposure or acceptability from enterprises. How that can, if we open the door for even that lot, that could also does a lot of in the formalization of our workforce. And also, right now, the scheme is concentrated only to the top 500. But I think that a medium and a smaller enterprises could uh, have much more larger avenues or opportunities, that could help them to, take more interns and create more skilled workforce. So definitely, it's a positive move, and I'm sure if the intent is good and even the niyat and niyati, both of them are working right now. So I'm sure that even the results are going to be, even more overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. The government has taken initiative, also a lot of initiative for the skill development program, done this internship. So definitely that's going to bridge somehow the skills gap and to
Absolutely.
more employment force. And Sumit, how do you see? And now we are talking about a lot of the emerging technologies and generative AI. How these technologies are going to change the landscape of the employment in coming year?
See, again, I was saying earlier, that it's the most simplified jobs which are there will be will possibly be influenced and taken over by the technology. Now, let's talk about in 80s when there were, calculators, or when the computers came over, and there was a whole lot of threat that came about. But then you realize that how computers made the people more efficient and more smarter and more productive. Well, yes, many of the people had to go through the entire computer literacy, where they had to get used to of the computer system and the software stuff. Likewise, when we look at even your internet technology, or when internet came in, we have seen the way internet has created many more businesses, and how that has also created a far more employment opportunities for a larger workforce. But obviously, at each of these development, technology development and advancement happens, there is a need for people to upskill themselves, become familiar with the technology rather than getting deterred. I think the idea is that how do we, become more future proof ourselves, and how do we equip ourselves with those skill sets to be employable. for sure that your lower order skill sets will be taken over by the technology. But I think, well, it will really have an impact because right now it's all about co-piloting, where the human beings and the technologies are going to go work together for some time before the technology completely takes over. And I think that's a sufficient time period which is available for the workforce to reskill and upskill themselves with those technologies so that they can take over those specialized and complex jobs which are going to come. Because in future, the jobs are going to be more specialized and complex. It is just that how do we prepare ourselves? How do we equip ourselves with the knowledge and skills to do those jobs? I think that is very critical to be considered.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And now coming to the job market right now, if you see that what sectors are going to perform the best and they will provide the more employment opportunities, and what sectors may not perform as good as like the top performers. So sector-wise, how do you see where we can see the most of the employment?
I think definitely what we see is that the two sectors which I definitely see that the employment is going to be, one is going to be electronic sector, because the way, or I would say manufacturing as a sector and electronic as an industry, if I were to look at, is where we're going to see a lot of employment that's going to get generated there, with the kind of investments also being made. We also want to see that the manufacturing jobs are going to be far more as compared to services. But also in the services, if I were to look at, it's the BFSI sector, which can expect a growth. We can also see a growth in the IT, but purely coming in from the GCCs, which are setting up. So I think these are the three sectors which we can see, the growth happening. I think not to mention even some of the e-commerce websites, specifically when we're talking about the the food deliveries and the logistics that they're dealing with. I think that's another segment which we're going to see. Also, with the kind of investments that we're seeing in the infrastructure development, that's another area to look at. I think some of the areas which are going to emerging sector is going to be definitely in the renewable energy sector. That's another segment to look at. However, those are going to be highly specialized jobs that we're looking at. And we're also looking at from a maintenance and servicing part of it as well. Because let's say today, if you have solar panels, how are you going to maintain them? How are you going to service them? That's another area. So I think renewable energy is going to be another one that we're going to look at. Apart from that, yes, there would be. I think the retail is there. Healthcare is another one. Retail may not see that kind of a growth, but definitely there would be growth there as well. But some of our studies have what we're seeing is that the rate at which the manufacturing jobs are going to grow is going to be almost like 200% as compared to the services sector, which is going to see about 35% growth in next 3 years to come. And I'm largely talking about the rate of the growth, not just the growth rate, but the rate at which the growth has going to happen. Currently, we see that, yes, it's the services will still have the larger jobs, but the growth is going to be much more in the manufacturing side.
And how do you see the construction sector? That is, I think, the sector which provides most of the job as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But thing is that we also, I think that's, as I said, it's largely related to the infrastructure, right? But what we really need to look at is that how we formalize this particular segment, because there's a lot of informality in this, entire construction sector. There was an announcement earlier in the month of July, which was made by one of the largest construction companies, that India has a shortage for the construction workers. Uh, you know, I think it was about 35,000 construction worker shortage. But if you see that, even if we have, people go through the skilling process, they are not able to get the return on the kind of skilling or the investment that they have made on themselves, and they look for a greener pasture. And we see people migrating to Saudi or some other country where they're able to get much more, money. They can earn. Their earning capacity is much more. I think what if there are definitely going to be a lot of jobs which are there in the your construction. But the idea that how we're going to formalize this sector, how we're going to ensure that the people are getting wages, the minimum wages, how they're getting their social security, which otherwise they're supposed to get. I think these are the factors that will determine the growth, or I would say the formalization of your construction sector. It's not that there are no jobs, but obviously don't get reported. But I think that's one segment which can have a huge spike.
Absolutely. And how do you see the IT? You also told me about the IT. That is, yeah, more jobs we can see to the IT sector. But if you compare with 2023, so it has been, kind of dry for the job
Absolutely,
IT sector.
absolutely,
In
absolutely,
2024,
absolutely.
it has opened up. The requirements started, the companies started hiring for the IT skills. How do you see it is going to be in 2025?
See, the digital skills, I would say, let's talk about digital skills. So digital skills will definitely be required, whether it's going to be your core, IT, where it's more to do with programming, data crunching, or data scientist, data architecture, internet technologies, the security, stuff that you're talking about there. But we see also that a lot of IT skills would be required even in the manufacturing side of it, both because organizations are now looking at digitization as the agenda. So definitely those jobs are going to be there. Whether they're going to be in the same number, what we have seen the peak of it, that's definitely going to be a question mark around it. Also with the GCCs kind of setting up operations in India, that's another segment to look at where there would be increase in the job. But however now, the whole it's not just about the Indian economy. I think we also have to look at how the global, geopolitical situation or geopolitical and geoeconomic situation kind of pans out. So I think now with specifically we have going to be a new president in the US. How the policies turn up there, how the geopolitical situation specifically that's happening in the European side of it, how will that pan out? I think that will have a huge impact on the employment in this particular sector in India. So I think we can only be optimistic about it. But definitely, the geopolitical and geoeconomic conditions will have a huge influence over the future. I would say that.
Absolutely. So I think we can look for the more green jobs in 2025. We can look for the more hiring into IT sector as well compared to 2023 and 2024. We can see more jobs into electronic sector and manufacturing. We can see BFSI sector that has also opened up after a little downfall, and now it's good projects are also there with the BFSI sector, and renewable sector, that is also the green energy, that
Jobs,
green
exactly. That's right.
skills that would be needed there.
That's
Thank
right.
you so
That's right.
much, Sumit, for talking to me and sharing your wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Umesh. It's always a pleasure talking to you.